Welcome to the Theory Primer. Theories give us perspective. Theories are like windows in a house, where you can look through multiple windows into the same room and get a different viewpoint from each window. When we talk about learning and instruction, we have three different perspectives. The first is behaviorism. Behaviorism views the mind as a black box. According to behaviorism, learning is regular expected responses. We know learning has occurred when we receive regular expected responses. Instruction, according to behaviorism, is repetition and reinforcement, and that is how we help people learn and develop. The second perspective is cognitivism, and it views the mind as a computer. According to cognitivism, learning is recall of stored information. If we can recall stored information, we know that learning has occurred. Instruction, according to cognitivism, is helping to grab someone's attention and then help them make sense of information and store it for later recall. The third perspective is constructivism. And constructivism views the mind as a rhizome. That is, all the different skills and knowledge are nodules that are interconnected to be drawn off of as needed. According to constructivism, learning is building knowledge by doing. Instruction, according to constructivism, is guiding problem solving. We're responsible for guiding our learners solving new and ill-defined problems. Now, based on those perspectives, we come up with two different types of theories. We have what is called descriptive theory, and descriptive theory in education helps us to answer the question, what is learning? Learning theory, which is the outcome of that, attempts to describe what learning is. The second type of theory that we have is prescriptive theory, which answers the question, how do we help people learn? The outcome of that is instructional theory, which give us methods for how to foster learning. In summary, we have three different perspectives: behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. From those perspectives, we have two theory types: descriptive theories, which are learning theories, which try to explain what learning is and how it happens, and prescriptive theories, instructional theories, which try to prescribe ways to help people learn and develop best.
The disciplines which contributed to theoretical models of teaching second language are modern psychology and modern linguistics, and the findings which affected the theories of the past theories were language as a behavior, language use as a pattern behavior, language and cognition, and the mentalistic trend. In the 1920s and the 1930s, behavioral psychologists were committed to the non-introspective study of human behavior, and they observed and measured the events which occurred when habits were formed. So they studied the forms of actions repeated in similar stimuli and the consequences of actions in consequences of stimuli and manipulated them. For example, Thorndike's study of reward and punishment, Thorndike's work on reward and punishment. The methods the structural linguists, on the other hand, were developing at that time for language learning emphasized overt pattern behavior of responses to stimuli. This combination of habit formation techniques came to be known as the audiolingual method. However, in the early 1960s, the criticisms were leveled against this audiolingual method because it was assumed that giving automatic responses to drills without knowing the actual structural patterns and the relationships of these structures to other structures of language forms are not capable of understanding the learning process. So it began to be recognized that some students learn effectively through visual clues, some learn effectively through auditory clues, some get traumatized when they were asked to give rapid responses in second language, whereas others feel stimulated. So as a result of these criticisms, teachers felt the need of need to relax tension in the learning environment and to introduce more variety of activity and friendliness and humor within an atmosphere in which the students would feel at ease with the teacher. So thus I come to the mentalistic trend. Second language teaching soon shared the tide of linguistics and psychology. Cognitive psychology became active in studying processes of the mind. Languages were no longer regarded by linguists as a distinct set of arbitrary vocal symbols or habits which has to be grown through conditioning. The transformational generative linguistic theory pointed out that this apparent similarity of the surface form would camouflage the important differences of meaning. Chomsky hypothesized that human beings came into the world with an innate capability of language learning ability and in form of language acquisition device which proceeds by hypothesis testing. In this way, the individual competence or internalized knowledge of grammar of language makes language use or performance possible. Language use is thus a rule-governed behavior that enables speakers to create new utterances which conform to the rules they have internalized. In the audiolingual approach, rules of grammar were not systematically presented. A return to explaining grammar rules was proposed in the rule-governed behavior of language teaching, and this then involved students' reasoning process to language learning. So let's take an example. As you can see, grammar is easier and more enjoyable to learn if it is treated as something to be investigated and discovered. For getting students to work out the rules, they should be familiar with the terminology of grammar. So we have tenses, modals, articles, conditionals, reported speech and passive in the flow chart here on the left hand side, and on the right hand side we have recognized examples of their various forms and structures. Similarly, vocabulary is better remembered when students are working with a mix of known and unknown items, and when words and phrases are organized in groups of related items. For example, here we have topic. So we have known and unknown items on the left hand side, then we have organizing those in related groups, and then we have topic. For example, natural disasters, we have meaning, for example, synonym, antonym, form, that is phrasal verbs, prefixes, suffixes, and functions, that is linking words and prepositions. Research has shown that vocabulary must be encountered 7 times before it can be actually learnt, and there is a need to personalize with the items of the vocabulary items and actively engage before we can master vocabulary. So familiar and unfamiliar vocabulary items need to be practiced together, needs to be discussed, and needs to be personalized to be made memorable to the learner. A deductive instructional approach of this type is more cognitive than the inductive approach of grammar of the audiolingual method. In the 1971, John B. Carroll, who had first advocated the term cognitive code learning, defined habit as any learned disposition to perceive, behave, or perform in a certain manner under specific circumstances. So to Carroll, a rule is an abstraction, but a habit is what has actually been learnt. In other words, the notion of habit is much more fundamental psychologically than the notion of rule. Theoretical linguists for semantics and pragmatics had been exploring new areas. So these are, we find the work of case grammar of Fillmore, the generative semantics of Lakoff, Ross and Macaulay, meaning structure grammar of Shafe. They all declared semantics to be the basic of any theoretical model of language. Pragmatics, along with semantics, rose in importance since the meaning was seen to be dependent on situations in which speech act occurred. According to functionalists, the purposes language serves in normal interaction is basic to the determination of syntactic functions. So, for example, if we take normal interaction, we find that language connects, develops ideas and concepts. So the function of language is to connect and develop ideas and concepts which can be followed at ease and which shows a sense of natural processes of hesitation, rephrasing, natural pauses and so on. If we look at the flow chart here, the areas of language use as sub-skill of speaking, we have discourse management, interactive communication, grammar and vocabulary and pronunciation. So discourse management would again go into fluency and coherence, interactive communication into turn taking, initiating and responding, grammar and vocabulary into practice, discuss and personalize, and pronunciation to prosodic features. Researchers in L1 acquisition like Brown and Schlesinger found that the early utterances of children are more readily explicable as semantic roles. So there are semantic roles, number of semantic roles. These semantic roles from the chart are action, agent, instrument, patient and experiencer. If we emphasize on function, on the other hand, the researchers who were working in this area were Brunner and Halliday. So according to Brunner, use is a powerful determinant of rule structures, whereas Halliday analyzed child's initial utterances in terms of 8 distinct functions. These are instrumental, regulatory, interactional, personal, heuristic, imaginative, representational and ritual. Language teachers found the functional approach to be more value for application, which you have already must have experienced in your classes, than some of the abstract linguistic models of the preceding decade. So the teachers began to recognize the artificiality of many language exercises and adapt them according to the needs of the learners so that they reflect more authentic uses of language. So you should always be doing that. David A. Wilkins in this area in 1976 proposed a notional syllabus. A notional syllabus implies a careful analysis of particular communicative situations in order to identify what students should be able to communicate. We have a diagram here which has 8 points. So the first, for analyzing communicative situations, the first one is time, then we have quantity, then space, then relational meaning, judgment, evaluation, personal emotions and emotional relations. So these are all joined. So time and judgment are joined, evaluation and quantity are joined, relational meaning and emotional relations are linked, personal emotions and space are also linked. So Wilkins proposed a cyclical rather than linear presentation of concepts and functions, which is very important for our speaking lessons, speaking skills, teaching speaking skills, and this is to express that the same semantic notions with more nuance. So if you follow a cyclical pattern, you can be sure of you can get back to the same semantic notions. Role playing is an important activity in this type of learning. My third point was language and cognition. In the 1970s, cognitive psychologists were interested in language acquisition, language production and language comprehension and developed their own models for their research findings and tested these empirically. Others focused in the areas of perception and computer simulation of cognitive processing. So why did this theory come? This is because it seemed then that what might be innate was not so much specific in acquiring language, and the general cognitive and perceptual processes involved were basic to other areas of language learning as well. So on the stages of cognitive development from infancy to maturity, Piaget's finding is aligned with the psychological studies of language acquisition and use. We have a short video here on Piaget's theory of cognitive development. So let's watch it.
Can you look at these two glasses? Do you think that they have the same amount of juice? You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass. Now, do you think that this glass has more juice, this glass has more juice, or do you think that they have the same amount?
That one has more.
This one has more, and why do you think that this one has more?
Because it's taller.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or do they have the same?
1, 2, 3. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're both the same.
They're the same?
5, 5.
Okay. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more, or do they have the same?
This one has more.
That one has more quarters?
Yeah.
Why does this row have more quarters?
Because it's more far away.
It's more far away?
Yeah, it's more far away than that. Looks bigger.
All right, we're going to play a game with the graham crackers, and we're going to share them between me and you, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Do you think that we shared those fairly?
No.
No, why not?
You have those and I have this one.
Well, what if we try this? Okay, can I put this down right there?
Okay.
Now is it fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, why is it fair now?
Because we both have two.
For the perceptual processes in language teaching, for example, listening and reading, Postowski advocated that an initial period of listening, there should be an initial period of listening to a new language. Writing activities, it should be taken as a supporting activity before anything can be produced orally, because this was an efficient approach than practicing structures and memorizing sentences of the language. In reading skill, attention was paid to the new information on reading processes as a psychological guessing game. For example, Kenneth S. Goodman's theories. Thus, reading activities included the common tasks of we all know matching tasks, gapped texts, multiple choice, and proofreading. So, matching tasks, that is looking at prompts one at a time and then getting back to the text again to find an answer, and giving parallel expressions of similar meanings. Gapped texts, that is tasks involving texts including charts and diagrams, so from where single words, phrases, sentences or paragraphs would be removed, and the learner would decide on the sentence or paragraph of each gap. Multiple choice, that is in form of a series of statements, a question plus answer, or an incomplete statement with a choice of phrases or words which would complete it, and there were usually 3 or 4 options. Only one of which is correct. Proofreading. So, reading tasks involve finding deliberate errors of various kinds in the text provided and correcting those errors. These all form part of grammar and vocabulary tests. The reading skill, I was talking about the reading skill, and it also forms a part of grammar and vocabulary. So, listening skill, the other perceptual skill, was an important area of language learning, and for developing this ability, students would listen to authentic materials in natural situations, and the recordings of such authentic materials include slow pace with little variation, exaggerated intonation patterns, carefully articulated pronunciation, received pronunciation, that is there should be no variation in accents, regularly repeated structures, that is grammatical structures natural to the topic, more formal language, that is not colloquial language from informal speech, complete utterances, complete grammatically correct sentences without ellipses. Speakers take careful turns, that is there is no interruption or speaking at the same time, and no background noise. Research in cognitive processes is an area of interest for imposing teaching and learning languages since the early 1970s. Teachers of second language were interested in how human beings perceive messages in speech and writing and how they process and interpret them. This follows a number of steps. We have a flow chart here. So new information is transformed according to this chart to information already stored by receivers, which is recorded and organized for storage and this information moves from short term to long term storage and then retrieved. So what is processed from what is perceived is related to individual motivation and meaningfulness. And it is difficult to imagine a career also as well in second language teaching. It is difficult as well to imagine a career in second language teaching that does not at some point in time involve working with students who are preparing for exams. So in this talk, we have discussed some of the exam tasks and the teaching techniques. So we have a short video excerpt here on leadership skills and self-regulation. So let's have a watch. Thank you.
Self-regulation. And this has a lot to do with our emotions. So not just our thoughts, but our emotions, our emotional state of being. And I've done a lot of work in this area with another writing partner, Crystal. And in fact, we're developing we call it the land of emotions, and how emotions really impact our well-being and our thoughts, right? They're connected. So what we have found through our research is that each one of us has the capacity to choose how they want to feel at any moment in time. We really can, despite of what's happening. I never thought that would be possible, but having a child that potentially could die, or when we go to the hospital and things are very hard, to be able to find joy, to be able to find solace, to be able to find comfort in those very icky, uncomfortable moments, we've been able to do that. So I can tell you that it is doable. And any of you that have had a lot of grief or any difficult circumstances and have practiced this, you know that it is available to each of us. It requires, however, that we give ourselves permission to do that. Right? Sometimes we feel unworthy, or, I'm supposed to be sad because my daughter is in the hospital. Right? And that's not true. Yes, you can be, it's not a pleasant experience. It's not the best ideal thing. However, you can choose to maintain a stance of openness to what is, and compassion for what's happening, and love, for your child and for the people that are there helping to take care of your child. So there's always a lovely silver lining. There's always something beautiful embedded in the muck. Right? And so you need not get stuck in the muck. Right? One of the greatest activities to bring that coherence of heart and mind comes from the folks at HeartMath Institute. Anyone here is familiar with HeartMath? Good, so this is new information. Awesome. So heartmath.org, you definitely want to check them out. It's on the handout that I'm referencing here. And they have something called the Quick Coherence Technique. Yes?
Excuse me, ma'am. Heart math or heart math? I'm sorry, my ears are a little.
M-A-T-H.
Thank you so much.
Yes, math. Thank you. Heartmath.org. And when we are feeling icky is because we're thinking we need to be feeling icky. And so to bring ourselves into literal coherence just takes a tiny little bit of a shift. Right? So I'm going to take you through what that is. And if you go on their website, you can download these slides yourselves as well. So you can bring those to your homes and your classrooms. So that it's 2 steps. It's so simple. Step 1, heart-focused breathing. Imagine your breath flowing in and out through your heart or your chest area. Instead of up here, just bring your awareness down to the center of your chest, to your heart, and focus it there. And do that for a few breaths. Then once you are in that good space and you are there in your heart, activate a positive feeling. What do we mean by activate a positive feeling? Well, think of something lovely. Think of your pet. Think of your child. Think maybe of your favorite vacation spot. You know, the things that when you think about it makes you smile, right? And you go, oh. And stay with that for a few more breaths. And that right there shifts your energy. It doesn't last forever, but it does shift your energy. And if you fall out of that stance, you can return right back to that. We have that capacity. We have that ability, every single one of us. Okay? So the way that you know when you may need to practice that is when you're feeling like completely depleted. You have lots of energy leaking out of you, and you're just feeling like, it's a nice grounding activity. There's lots and lots of other activities, but I think this one is really quick and really good. All right, so that is for self-regulation.